What do you want to see the plan to be here? I mean, is it realistic as you sit in Fairfield, across Sydney, people are watching this and looking at these case numbers every day and thinking, are we going to be like this for the next 8 weeks, maybe until Christmas? What's your read of it?
Well, look, we do know that, Victoria has shown last year that it can turn around. It's hard yards. It takes a long time. It can be turned around. I remember when Dan Andrews came out and said we need to get it below 5 cases a day, and people said that was impossible. The Victorian government and particularly the people of Victoria did that. So it can be done. It's not all doom and gloom. But ultimately, Laura, we need the vaccinations rolling out much more quickly. The biggest problem in my community is not vaccine hesitancy, it's vaccine supply. Vaccine hesitancy would be a bigger issue if we had more vaccine supply. But the people coming up to me to the degree that they can when we're out and about or contacting my office via email and Facebook and what have you aren't saying, I don't want to get the vaccine so much. They're saying, I'd love to get the vaccine, but I can't. So that is the key to the future, is to actually get Australia up to a much more international best practice standard. We're last in the world at the moment, in the developed world, and that's pretty ordinary when it comes to lockdowns. Now, the Prime Minister had a 4-phase plan, which I thought was pretty heavy on spin and announcement at the time.
Let's talk about that plan. Let's quickly talk about that plan, because it was a national cabinet decision. So it wasn't just the PM, it was the Premier.
Yeah, but he drove it, Laura.
Sure, but someone's got to drive it. Someone's got to bring all these premiers together, because they are making the decisions to lock down. One of the agreements was, okay, we halved the cap of Australians coming home. The other one was no unnecessary lockdowns. That was 2.5 weeks ago. Now we have South Australia going into a full lockdown, banning construction on a cluster of 5 cases.
Yeah, but let's keep this also in perspective, Laura. Why are we here? Where did this start? One case, one limo driver in New South Wales. So one case has started this mess. And forgive me for saying, Laura, that my community is suffering pretty badly here, because the government, New South Wales government, didn't want to lock down Bondi at that time. Now, again, I don't make that as a partisan point, but it's a simple point that if you move quickly, you can stop these situations. This original breach wasn't in Fairfield. It somehow got to Fairfield. It somehow got into my local government area, and now we're paying a huge price. So I can understand premiers wanting to move quickly, because if you move quickly, you might avoid the sort of situation we're in southwest Sydney right now, because through no fault of anybody in my community, there was a quarantine breach through a limousine driver, and there was a decision taken not to move quickly in Bondi a few weeks ago. And now you can walk down the main street of Fairfield and you run into people who aren't in work, shops are shut, and that's all as a result of that. So this 4-point plan was always spin. It was always going to be the case that premiers were going to do what they needed to do. And I think premiers are seeing what's happened in New South Wales and know that perhaps they need to move quickly so that they can avoid some of their communities going through what my community is going through as we speak.
Well, Mr. Bowen, I think communities right across Sydney, Greater Sydney, are seeing very similar things. Fairfield does feel like ground zero. Absolutely. But don't you think it's pretty soul-destroying to see state premiers give pot shots to one another and also divide communities? I mean, where are we at the end of all of this? We've got people dobbing each other in and communities pitted against each other.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, on those 2 points, first term premiers taking pot shots. I mean, that's something that, I've always tried to avoid, and the Labor Party's tried to avoid. Certainly at the federal level, because it was always the case that premiers were doing their best. I never thought there was a gold standard in Australia. I never thought there was a gold standard. Premiers were dealing with different situations, and Laura, there wasn't a gold standard, and there isn't a gold standard today. That is not the way forward here. And on communities being pitted against each other within states, you're right. I mean, everybody in Sydney is doing it tough. Everybody in many communities is doing it tough. The fact of the matter is, here in my community, people are doing it particularly tough. We've had a lot of police on the streets to start with. There have been police helicopters, over my house 4 times a day for the last fortnight, making sure nobody's exercising in groups of bigger than 2. It's been very, very full on in here in my community. And so we all have to be in it together and mean it. And that means the rules have to be applied across the board equally. It means that people have to, obviously, people in Fairfield understand why we've got restrictions on. They're responding to those restrictions. They're following those restrictions. They're following those directions. 99% of cases, that is happening. But let's ensure that when we say we're all in it together, we mean it as well.